On December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor slept under a quiet Hawaiian sky. Yet, in Washington, cables had been arriving for weeks, carrying urgent warnings that Japan was preparing a massive strike. Military intelligence tracked naval movements across the Pacific, but nothing was relayed clearly or quickly to Admiral Kimmel and General Short, the commanders on site. Critical information sat untouched in offices thousands of miles away, while the fleet remained clustered together, unprotected. America had broken Japan's top-secret diplomatic codes, codenamed Magic. Every message from Tokyo to its embassies was read in Washington long before it reached its destination. In late November, instructions went out. Destroy code machines, burn sensitive documents, clear signs, war was imminent. These warnings were sent to military chiefs, but heavily edited summaries were all that reached Hawaii. Key phrases like imminent attack were erased entirely. On the night of December 6th, a long, urgent message from Tokyo to its Washington embassy was intercepted. It ordered the termination of all negotiations, a virtual declaration of war. Staff worked through the night, decoding it. By 9 a.m. local time, the meaning was clear: attack within hours. Yet, no priority alert was dispatched to Pearl Harbor. Regular mail procedures were used instead, ensuring it arrived too late when seconds mattered. Why did they choose the slowest method? The Japanese strike force sailed thousands of miles across the northern Pacific, maintaining total radio silence. But American tracking stations noted a disturbing absence. Japanese radio traffic had vanished completely. Normally, hundreds of signals were picked up daily. Intelligence officers knew silence meant major fleet movement, but this analysis was never shared with Hawaii. Instead, reports claimed the main Japanese ships were still near home waters. At 7 a.m., two young soldiers operating a mobile radar unit detected a massive formation of aircraft approaching from the north. They plotted the largest blips they had ever seen and phoned headquarters. The officer on duty, convinced it was only a flight of B-17s arriving from California, told them to forget it. Standard protocol required full investigation of unknown contacts. That morning, protocol was abandoned without explanation. Throughout November, 3 general war warnings were sent to Pacific commands. Each told of hostile action possible at any moment. But every message ended with the same phrase: the United States desires that Japan commit the first overt act. In Hawaii, this was interpreted strictly: do not provoke, do not patrol aggressively, do not disperse the fleet. Orders ensured the base remained a concentrated, easy target. British codebreakers also read Japanese traffic and knew an attack was coming. They shared details with American counterparts, specifically mentioning Hawaii as a likely target. Years later, British officers revealed they were told by U.S. officials, "We know, but don't mention it to the commanders in the field." Records of these exchanges were removed from files, only resurfacing decades later in declassified archives. Admiral Husband Kimmel repeatedly requested long-range patrol planes and permission to deploy submarines for scouting. His requests were denied. Washington kept the best intelligence assets for itself. When Kimmel asked specifically if enemy carriers were unaccounted for, he was told all were accounted for. After the attack, it was revealed Washington knew 4 days that carriers were missing, but said nothing. Planes on the ground were parked wingtip to wingtip, grouped tightly to prevent sabotage, but making them perfect targets for air assault. General Short had been ordered to prioritize defense against local uprising, not air raid. These orders contradicted earlier intelligence about external threats. Ammunition was locked in armories, not loaded in guns. When the first bombs fell, crews had to break locks just to access bullets. After the attack, investigations began immediately. But key operational files from the War Department went missing. Maps showing projected Japanese routes, Daily intelligence summaries and communication logs were nowhere to be found. Years later, investigators discovered these documents had been intentionally withheld or destroyed. Without them, reconstructing exactly what was known became impossible. What evidence was erased before it could be seen? Written in 1940 by Lieutenant Commander Arthur McCollum. This document outlined an 8-step plan to provoke Japan into attacking the United States. Steps included embargoing oil, freezing assets, and positioning fleets as a threat. The memo concluded, "If these measures are taken, Japan will be forced to strike." Every single recommendation was adopted by President Roosevelt exactly as suggested. Did Washington follow a blueprint for war? In July 1941, the U.S. cut off 90% of Japan's oil supply, a fatal blow to their military machine. Leaders in Tokyo knew war was the only option left to secure resources. American diplomats understood this clearly cutting oil was an act of war. Yet the policy stood. By late 1941, intelligence reports predicted attack within weeks. Economic strangulation was used as a trigger, and officials waited for the reaction. Was the trap set long before December? President Roosevelt and his cabinet desperately wanted to enter the war in Europe. But public opinion was strongly isolationist. Congress refused to declare war unless America was attacked. Secretary of War Henry Stimson wrote in his diary, "The question is how we should maneuver them into the position of firing the first shot." Private conversations confirmed the goal. Create a situation where attack was inevitable. Days before the attack, plans were made to send additional fighter planes and radar equipment to Hawaii. At the last minute, orders were changed. Equipment was diverted to the Philippines instead, despite Hawaii being identified as a risk. Even when cargo was already loaded and ready to sail, manifests were altered. Essential defenses were moved away from the most vulnerable spot in the Pacific. Why strip protection from the place most at risk? As early as January 1941, U.S. Ambassador to Japan Joseph Grew sent a dispatch to Washington. He reported rumors from inside the Japanese military. They were planning a surprise strike on Pearl Harbor in case of war. He called it fantastic, but possible. His report was filed away, marked not credible. No follow-up investigation was ordered, no extra precautions taken. The exact plan later executed was dismissed 9 months early. Did they ignore the exact truth? The U.S. Navy used multiple code systems. Codes used in Washington were different from those in Hawaii. Critical intelligence was sent in high-level codes that Pearl Harbor commanders were not cleared to read. When urgent details arrived, they couldn't be decoded locally. Washington held the keys to information, but refused to hand them over. This created an intentional gap between what was known and what could be acted upon. Was security used as a weapon against defense? While Hawaii was left in the dark, the Philippines received detailed, specific warnings days before the attack. They were told exactly when and where strikes would happen. When questioned, officials claimed the Philippines were a higher priority yet military strategy at the time. Listed Pearl Harbor as the main base. This discrepancy was never explained. Why save one location and abandon another? Why the double standard in intelligence sharing? Radio intelligence units in San Francisco intercepted Japanese messages, indicating a grid system used to map Pearl Harbor ship positions. They decoded references to ships in pairs and battleship row, exactly how vessels were anchored. This data was sent to Washington but never forwarded to Hawaii. Analysts later admitted they knew the Japanese were mapping the harbor, yet did nothing to disrupt or warn. Admiral Kimmel requested long-range aerial patrols to scan the northern approaches, the very route the Japanese eventually took. Washington replied there were not enough planes available. Yet, records show hundreds of patrol aircraft were sitting idle in California and other bases. Even when Kimmel offered to share maintenance crews, his requests were denied. The most likely avenue of attack remained wide open. On November 26, Secretary of State Cordell Hull delivered an ultimatum to Japan: withdraw from all conquered territories or face total embargo. Historians agree this document was intentionally designed to be unacceptable. Japanese leaders viewed it as a declaration of war. Intelligence reports predicted exactly this reaction. Yet the note was delivered without consulting military commanders or preparing defenses. Was it a diplomatic trigger pulled knowingly? 8 official inquiries were held after the attack. Most blamed local commanders, calling it incompetence. But minority reports and private testimonies pointed fingers higher up. These critical findings were classified and sealed for decades. Key witnesses were ordered to alter statements or face court-martial. Only in the 1970s, under the Freedom of Information Act, did the full extent of censorship emerge. Did investigations aim for truth or cover-up? On the morning of December 7th, Army Chief of Staff George Marshall received the final decoded message confirming war was imminent. Instead of issuing an immediate alert, he went for a long horseback ride. He was unreachable for hours. When he returned, he chose to send the warning via commercial telegraph, not the military's faster encrypted radio. It arrived hours after the bombs stopped falling. Why delay when every minute counted? Officers who spoke out about withheld information had their transcripts changed. Statements mentioning missing warnings or ignored intelligence were crossed out or rewritten. One officer noted in his diary, "They are making me the scapegoat." Files show direct orders from the White House to correct testimony that contradicted the official narrative. Those who refused transfers were discharged or demoted. Was history rewritten to protect leaders? Stock market activity in the days leading up to the attack showed unusual patterns. Trading volumes in defense and shipping stocks spiked. Unusually large bets were placed on companies likely to profit from war, while investors sold off Hawaiian-based assets rapidly. Investigators later traced these trades to individuals with close ties to Washington intelligence circles. These findings were quietly dropped from reports.com. Did insiders profit before the disaster? On the morning of the attack, the U.S. aircraft carriers were not in port. They had been sent out on missions days earlier, while battleships older, less vital to future warfare, remained clustered together. Naval doctrine at the time stated carriers were the primary target. Yet they were moved to safety, while obsolete ships were left exposed. Critics ask, did they save the assets that mattered, sacrificing what could be replaced? Was the damage limited to what was acceptable? For decades, military planners created War Plan Orange detailed strategies for war with Japan. It predicted exactly how Japan would strike: a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor to disable the fleet. Every step was mapped out, every timeline calculated. These plans were taught at war colleges. Yet, in 1941, commanders were told the plan was outdated and irrelevant. Everything known was suddenly ignored. Why discard the very plan that predicted the truth? Records show Roosevelt and his advisors rejected every Japanese attempt to negotiate peace in late 1941. Even moderate proposals were dismissed without counteroffers. Internal memos reveal officials believed any settlement would delay entry into the European war. The administration's priority was action, not peace. Negotiations were used only to buy time while pressure built toward conflict. Did they block peace to ensure war? After the attack, radar logs from the Opana station were collected and immediately classified. Original paper records were lost or destroyed. Only typed summaries remained, summaries that downplayed the size and timing of the contact. Technicians who operated the equipment were separated and forbidden from comparing notes. The clearest physical evidence of early detection was systematically erased. Was proof of early warning destroyed? British military stations in the Pacific also detected the incoming strike force. They sent urgent alerts to American liaison officers. These messages were marked, received in logs, but never forwarded up the chain. Later, American officials claimed they never got them. British documents prove otherwise, but were dismissed as errors. Allies were told to stay silent about what they knew. Did foreign sources confirm the advance knowledge? In Washington, defense responsibilities were split between Army and Navy with unclear lines of authority. In Hawaii, commanders were given conflicting orders. Defend against sabotage, but do not prepare for air raid. Patrol, but do not provoke. Expect war, but stay relaxed. This confusion was not accidental. It was a deliberate administrative structure designed to ensure no single person could take effective action. Within hours of the attack, Roosevelt began drafting his Day of Infamy speech. Historians noted it was polished, structured, and ready far faster than possible if written only after news arrived. Advisors later admitted drafts had been prepared weeks earlier, waiting only for the date to be filled in. The reaction was so perfectly orchestrated, it suggested the outcome was expected. Was the response scripted before the event? Declassified papers show Roosevelt had secretly promised British leaders America would enter the war, but only if provoked. He needed an event to unite the nation. Private letters reveal he told Winston Churchill, "We will find a way to make them fire the first shot." These agreements were kept from Congress and the public. Hidden behind neutral statements were promises made that required disaster. Despite massive destruction, some papers survived. Notes in margins, handwritten corrections, and half-erased cables reveal contradictions. One message says "not imminent" in typed text, but a pencil note adds "expected within 48 hours." These small traces paint a picture of officials trying to hide what they knew, leaving tiny clues behind. The cover-up was thorough but not perfect. Do hidden notes tell the real story? Over 2,400 Americans died that day. Thousands more were injured. Battleships sank, planes burned. If warnings had been sent, if patrols had flown, if ammunition had been loaded, history would have changed. But the pattern holds. Intelligence withheld, defenses diverted, warnings delayed, commanders blinded. Every failure points upward, toward the highest levels of government. The tragedy was not just defeat, it was opportunity. Evidence shows advanced knowledge existed. Warnings were suppressed, defenses weakened, and diplomatic pressure applied to force an attack. The administration wanted war, needed war, and maneuvered the nation into war. Pearl Harbor was not just a failure, was a calculation. The question remains, did leaders allow the attack to happen? The files, the testimonies, and the contradictions all lead to one unavoidable conclusion. Yes,